Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and with the government's announcement of a trade agreement in principle last week with Japan, I'm afraid the Brexiteer commentators and reporters rather went to town on it. I think they should have been a little bit more careful, a bit more circumspect as I was in reading the press statement, because I'm afraid to say they've rather made themselves look a little bit foolish. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'm afraid Trump's going to have to wait. I was going to be talking about him at this point. It's going to have to be pushed back to tomorrow. Sorry about that orange one. But Brexit, wow. So, yeah, there was an announcement last week. Political commentators were all over it for the prospect of a trade deal with Japan. In reality, it's a really bare-bones trade agreement. I covered it, threw my own thoughts out on what the government had said about it, because that's pretty much all we had to go on. I welcomed it as good news. This isn't we don't want a trade deal. No, we absolutely do. But had to point out that the deal was only of the same value as that which we already had as part of the EU's arrangements. We hadn't actually improved upon it. But I'm afraid the Brexit commentators were going a little bit mad. It's better than the deal that Japan have with the EU, they said. We've done a better deal than the EU. I had to respond, no, the government's press statement doesn't say that, and there was nothing else, there was no other information about it. People were pointing out the video that I did a while ago on the Japanese trade agreement on how the trade deal couldn't possibly be better than the one that Japan had with the EU. Oh, that video didn't age well, they were saying. We got a better trade deal. No, we didn't. And even the government, who are trying to hype the hell out of this, did not say so. But I still invited them to tell me how they thought it was better. They didn't get an answer to that one. Of course not, because they haven't read the text of the agreement, let alone compared it to the text of the EU-Japan deal. Neither have I. Hasn't been published yet. So all anyone can go off is what people who have read it say about it. Now, I presume the UK government have read it, although given recent events, it seems that they do not always read everything that they negotiate and sign. But the government press release said that the agreement went further than the EU's agreement in a number of areas. Now, there's a couple of things about that. First of all, it didn't really give any examples. Now, there are a few correspondents have given a couple of examples since, but if they don't give any cast iron examples, if we don't have a piece of text to compare to the EU's version, then you don't know that it's objectively true. You can say that it goes further, but does it? You need to compare. But the second thing, and this is what's most important, so let's say it was better in a few respects, and I expect it to be. I've always said I expect it to be. It could also be worse in others. So what you're looking at is, when you're saying, is the trade deal we've struck with Japan better than the one the EU struck, the overall net effect is still going to be a worse deal. Because one thing that I said in that video that apparently Brexiteers think was wrong is that it would not surprise me at all if the agreement is a little better in a few areas that the EU don't care about, so they won't make a fuss about, just to sell it to the public as who don't do detail as better, when actually the overall impact is worse. And remember, the EU-Japan trade deal, which can be read, because that's published, specifically says that if either side gives better terms on anything with another country, they have to revise this agreement in order to bring it into line. So if Japan did agree anything with us, particularly on trading goods, that was better than they had with the EU, then the EU would be tapping them on the shoulder and going, you need to adjust that. That's how that deal works. So it's unlikely that it really is better in any respect, other than a few areas of the service industry, which is important to us, don't get me wrong. That's why I welcome this trade agreement, even in principle. But all of that was obvious without reading. All of it, which is just as well, because we can't read it just yet, not till next month at least. But Brexiteers were going mad about it, as you'd expect, but just making the usual illiterate statements. Nothing especially embarrassing there. That's not what's really embarrassing. It was all fine, I suppose, until the Financial Times ran a story last night. Oh dear. Oh dear. So, you know how Boris Johnson is blocking an EU trade deal at the moment because he doesn't like these level playing field rules? Specifically, he said he won't sign up to the EU state aid rules. I mean, he claims he doesn't want to agree to the EU state aid rules. Well, it turns out that this agreement with Japan, which was announced last week, commits the UK to even harsher state aid restrictions than the EU are asking for. I cannot wait to see what the Brexiteers are going to think about that. Not only have we agreed to a foreign country's rules in order to get a trade agreement, who'd have thought we'd have had to do that? That even by the admission of the UK government, when you look at it, doesn't actually work out any better for our economy than we had with the EU. And actually, when you look at the overall situation where we are now, it is a net reduction of 7% to our GDP. Fantastic there. But to get that reduction of 7% to our GDP, we've had to agree harsher rules than being in the EU, or just agreeing with the EU to have access to their market. Absolutely pissed myself. So the Brexiteers, who won't agree to the level playing field with the wealthiest market in the world, worth about half our trade, have just agreed a playing field that actually slopes away from us and towards Japan for a market worth about 2% of our trade. And I'll tell you another thing that this means, because that in itself is just vaguely hilarious. Another thing that this means, it means that if the agreement is signed, and I will remind people it has not been signed, agreed in principle hasn't been signed. I mean, and we're not just talking about it needs to be ratified by Japanese Parliament and the British Parliament. I've no doubt it'll be ratified by the British Parliament, and I've got no reason to believe it won't be ratified by the Japanese Parliament either, although there is a suggestion that Japan want to see a little bit how we're going to behave ourselves with the EU before they sign it. But I don't know that, and I've not got that from the Financial Times or the government. But if it is signed, and, you know, I've got no particular reason to believe it will not, then Westminster will have to legislate. We will have to pass laws that Japan wants us to pass. A foreign nation. Take back control. Go on. Tell me again how great a trade agreement this is. Tell me how wonderful it is to agree to harsher rules than the EU. Thank goodness we've left the EU and all those ridiculous bureaucratic rules. Now we're free to sign up to even harsher rules with a market much further away with whom we trade much less. About a 50th of our trade. And when you consider how we have capitulated just to get some sort of agreement this year. And this is capitulation. Not everyone is happy. Apparently, David Frost, who's our chief negotiator for the EU, is not at all happy about this. And I'll tell you why in a moment. But you look at just how we've capitulated on this just to get any sort of agreement, because it would have been bloody embarrassing to have got to the end of the year without anything. This was the only thing left. The US have told us to piss off. We're not agreeing anything with the EU. Everyone else has said, no, deal with the EU first, then we'll talk. Imagine the bending over we're going to have to do to get anything from a more important market. Not that we're even seriously talking with any other important market of any kind, actually, let alone the big ones. Because what this highlights is just what we knew about Brexit. It exposes us badly because everyone knows just how desperate we are. At the moment, we are on a slippery slope towards abandoning all of our trade agreements. Everyone knows how desperate we are for a trade agreement. They can say, oh, Japan will have absolutely known what they were doing. They'd have gone, okay, you can sign up to these. Liz Truss will have said, oh, well, this is even worse than the EU. Yeah, we know. And we also know you're going to sign up to it. Are you? Yeah, we are. Impossible to get a good deal for us. And this government will never be able to announce one that is better than we had as a member of the EU, because it's not possible. We're too desperate, and everyone knows it. And don't give me any crap about them saying, oh, it's worth more. It's worth an extra 15 billion a year to our GDP. that is a gain of 0.07%, which, yeah, okay, like I said in the last video, is a gain, but with the usual margins for error. When you actually work out the real effect, that's going to be a negative value, because what they've used is the optimistic estimation there. When you get the real data, it won't be that high. And when they're already only claiming it's just a little bit above zero, it's still zero to the nearest 0.5%, for goodness sake, then... But here's why David Frost will be so furious about this. Because when the Brexit talks get underway this week, there's another round of Brexit talks this week, which I've completely forgotten about, but with the accelerated timetable, there's a bit more going on. It's in Brussels this time. Barnier is going to be pissing himself just like I did. It's going to be meeting David Frost, our chief negotiator, and going, okay, David, tell me again about your objections to our state aid rules. Go on. David Frost will have no answer at all for that. He's going to have to take the position that it somehow makes sense to agree to harsher rules with a distant trading partner with whom we barely trade anything than our closest neighbour that represents the largest market in the world, upon whom we rely upon for food, medicines and most of our economy. He's going to have to try and come up with something to back that position up. And then what happens in January? So at the moment we're on course for a no deal at all. So then we get to January with no EU deal, and then those shortages, food and medicines, very serious. And I and others will be telling people who are suffering from those shortages that the reason we didn't get a deal is because Boris Johnson wouldn't sign up to the EU state aid rules. He wouldn't have it. But, and this is by a government who don't even use state aid, by the way, so it's a complete nonsense anyway. And yet, we did agree to much harsher conditions with Japan. Well, give us some bloody sushi, they'll say then. But such are the hazards of trying to talk about an agreement that hasn't even been published. I suppose the pro-Brexit commentators didn't really worry about that because they didn't intend to read it even when it was published. I mean, it's words, for goodness sake. We struggle a bit with words. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.